Greetings, everyone. I'm doing a bit of a late night show because I've just come back from having a lovely dinner with friends out, and we were discussing Gurdjieff, and we'd gone to a place where the food was all cooked fresh in front of us, and we were having unprocessed food, as one of my friends was saying, which was really great to eat. And the same friend was reminding us of what Gurdjieff was saying about how definitely in the last 100 years. In Gurdjieff's time, the processed food was becoming more and more available to one and all. I know in the 1800s, because I used to read a lot about the 1800s, I had to do it for history for school and things like that. And they used to talk about how the shopkeepers were even then doing things to the food to try and make it last longer, putting in certain chemicals so that it stayed fresher for longer. Also to, for example, put in certain powders in, like let's say some kind of powdered food, so that you was not getting as much quality food as you should have been, and whatever chemicals they were throwing into it, so they're obviously sabotaging the food back in the 1800s. But it slowly got worse and worse and worse, everyone losing the quality of what food is, and it's more about the quantity of how much food there is, and money making obviously as well. Which brings me back to Beelzebub's tales to his grandson and all and everything. And I'm going to do a little bit of a reading from the Beelzebub in America chapter. So Beelzebub's with his grandson Hussein, and he's moaning about us humans as usual. And he says, I think, my boy, that it will be very useful to you for your more detailed representation and understanding of the strangeness of the psyche in general of these free-brain beings who have taken your fancy and who arise on the planet Earth. If I explain to you in somewhat greater detail the causes which, in the common presences of these American free-brain beings, produce disharmony in both of these fundamental functionings of theirs. And obviously this is the Beelzebub in America chapter, so he's discussing the Americans, but I'm seeing that this is becoming more and more apt for everybody the world over. Not everybody's like this. We're talking about the masses here and how the sleepy people and what they're up to and what they're doing, and how they're not eating the right type of food. Remember, Gurdjieff talks about the three types of food. We need to, obviously the air that we breathe in, the food that we eat, and the impressions we take in from everything we're doing and seeing and hearing and going about our daily business, what them impressions are doing to us, are the free foods that we need to develop ourselves. Good quality versions, not poor quality. And what's happening to the food these days? Very poor quality. So of course it's cheap. Many of us don't have money, so it's very difficult to buy quality food. And I'm sure it's all part of the agenda of keeping us dumbed down, keeping us eating crappy food. I very much advise people, if they can, grow your own food if you can. Get yourself some allotments. I'm on a waiting list for an allotment again. They're very few and far between where I live, but I do try and grow whatever food I can. But obviously I haven't got enough land to grow enough food to last me for a year. I grow a bit of food and it lasts me for a few weeks. And then I have to go out and buy, if I can afford it, organic food, which thankfully is in London beginning to come down in price. But we have to be careful of the food that's being given to us, because it is full of obviously poisons and chemicals and things to make it last longer. I'm sure I've told you all of the story of the Mackie D's burger that someone bought me once a long time ago, and I've never eaten that kind of food, but they bought it for me for some reason. And we did the little test of keeping it on the windowsill, and it stayed on that windowsill for weeks before it started even showing a little bit of mold. And that started in the lettuce that was in it, and that didn't start going moldy for weeks. And the meat itself didn't go moldy for a long time. It might have gone a bit rubbery, not that any of us ate it. And the bread didn't go strange, the BAP or whatever it is. That's all them chemicals they're putting in it to keep it fresh and last longer. But anyway, let me continue what Beelzebub says. So this could be applied to all of us today, of what we're seeing of people eating. For convenience of exposition, I shall explain to you separately the causes of the disharmony of each of these two fundamental functionings. And he's talking about us living in this universe and what we should be doing and what's not happening. And the main problem is our digestion, and he talks about our sex organs. And we know people are sexed up. We're showing sex. We should be having sex all the time. Sex is promoted and put in all the advertising and all the shows. They think that we all want to watch sex all the time and things. The masses probably do, or maybe they do, or they're being told to, so they think that's what they should be doing. Everyone thinks they should be, getting laid every night and things like that. But I think, as Gurdjieff says, this is a bit of a misuse of sexual energy. When we're developing ourselves, that sexual energy is being used to work on developing our more harmonious body, and that sexual energy, which is a creative force, should be helping us create our higher being bodies, our own being in our everyday living on this planet life. Because obviously sexual energy is a creative force. It creates babies and makes children. That's what the creative force is. I think many artists use that sexual energy to create the wonderful works of art, the real works of art that everybody is astounded by, the Mona Lisa and things like that. And obviously I know a lot of artists, a bit of an artist myself, and I try to use that sexual energy to create something and make something, whether it's the models I make or the artwork that I make or the whatever sewing I do. I'm using hopefully that sexual energy in the right way to make it be nice to think an objective piece of art. For those of you that understand Gurdjieff's objective and subjective pieces of art. But most artists, they're using that sexual energy and perhaps are not tuning into it in the manner that Gurdjieff's talking about in the work to create them objective pieces of art. But they're still making some art, which is better than misusing that sexual energy, or music, or whatever it is, a creative project of some kind, writing, I don't know, go and do some carpentry or something, or create your inner self. But anyway, let me continue. So he's talking about the disharmony within of the two fundamental functionings. And Gurdjieff says, and I shall begin with the explanation of the causes of the disharmony in the functioning of the transformation of their first being food, or as they themselves would say, with the causes of the spoiling of their stomachs. I know so many people with stomach problems over the years of my life. Most people I meet, most of their problems are in their stomach, which obviously is near our solar plexus. So there's a lot of emotion going on, a lot of turmoil. They're not harmonized in their living, eating bad food, stuffing themselves, comfort eating, blah, blah, blah. Maybe you yourself have had stomach problems in the past. When you're not feeling right and centered in yourself, your stomach is in turmoil. The solar plexus is also in turmoil, which is just above the stomach. For the disharmony of this function of theirs, there were and now still are several definite causes, comprehensible even to the reason of ordinary, normal, free-brain beings. But the chief and fundamental cause is that from the very beginning of the formation of their community, they gradually got accustomed, owing to all kinds of established surrounding conditions and influences proceeding from authority, which happened to be formed of itself abnormally. They are now already thoroughly accustomed never to use for their first being food anything fresh whatsoever, but to use exclusively only products already decomposed. Now, it's quite important there about the authority. Well, the whole paragraph's important, the whole book's important. But, the wrong people get in charge. Authority gets in charge. It's always trying to make money and to cut corners and to make sure that we're all satisfied by giving us, cheap frills, cheap food, keep us dumbed down. So we have to be aware of that at the beginning. What is the agenda of all this rubbish food that's out there? I remember at the end of lockdown 1 of England, the queue for the drive-through McDonald's shut down the town, which is just ridiculous, you know. Why did everybody want to go and eat that? And I didn't even want to say their name then, I should have said Mackie D's. So the masses still eat this crap food, which has been put to them from the authorities. Cheap, not even food really, but it's not doing you, the physical person, any good, and it's not feeding the brain either. Whereas fresh food, proper food, quality food, I'm sure I'm speaking to the choir here, I'm sure you're all eating properly, but just so that you can understand, this is why the masses are like they are. This is one of the problems, is that they're eating that kind of food and so not progressing in any way really, because that food is keeping them down in the denser realms, keeping them, oh, God knows what that food does. I'm sure many of you have seen that movie that came out, I think it was back in the 90s, that guy did, about living off Mackie D's for a month and what it did to his nervous system, his physical system, destroyed a lot of it. You know, that should be required viewing for all children in every school. But as I said, you know, I do understand it is difficult to get fresh food. It's difficult to get good quality food. You know, maybe you do live in a fantastic place and villages and farms that can provide quality food. But we must remember what it is we're intaking. I've always believed in blessing my food before I eat it, or saying grace or saying a prayer, some people do, because that can help change the vibrations in a food. But I don't know if it would work for the Mackie D's type food, because that's not really food. That's, I don't even know what to call it. And the word is a powerful thing. It's a creative force again. I forgot to turn my phone off. Sorry, now it's going to keep beeping. But anyway, we're doing that creative force, putting blessings onto the food that we're eating to help change them vibrations. If you're eating some meat or bird, you know, fish or birds, chicken or whatever, we need to think about that animal's demise. Obviously, we're not sitting there thinking, oh God, poor thing got slaughtered, but we need to give it blessings and wishes for where it is now and thank it for giving us this food. You know, and even for the vegetables, they all scream when we cut into them. They're all alive beings, but we need to eat. I do understand that we need sustenance. You know, I'm not a full-blown vegetarian. I do try and eat organic stuff, organic food, eat a lot of fish, but I always think about that creature for and thank it for giving me the food. And I'm sure that helps with the vibration of that food as you're eating it, and for yourself and for that creature as it moves on to its next stage after it's been slaughtered. So what we're eating is important. Another thing, you know, obviously with the authorities, they try to keep people living on as poorly as they can, as monetary wise. So that makes it difficult to buy quality food. Then there are the, you know, the elites out there that live off the best. I'm a big fan of Rudolf Steiner's biodynamic farms. If I can buy them kind of vegetables, all the better for that. And if I can get, you know, meat that's been grown in a, where I know that they're running free and living happily before they're used for us to have to eat from, I feel that's a better vibration in it than all those that are penned in some horrible cage somewhere to be fattened. And these are important things that we need to be thinking about when we're eating to help our own development. And Gurdjieff reminding us that they're going to try and process the food down to just chemicals really, and it's not really proper food. And I'm sure many of you are aware that, you know, they were trying the insect diet a few years ago, well, even only a couple of years ago. We should be eating insects and be happy. So carrying on with Gurdjieff. At the present time, the beings of this group almost never consume for their first being food any edible product which still retains all those active elements put into every being by great nature herself as an indispensable requisite for taking in power for normal existence. But they preserve, freeze, and essence fire before all these products of theirs. and use them only when most of these active elements required for normal existence already volatilized out of them. There is, in many traditions, the idea that, say you slaughtered your calf, your cow, your pig, your rabbit, your hare, and really you should eat it within 3 days, because otherwise all the nutrients and the good vibrations have left it, have departed. And this is something I think Gurdjieff is trying to be telling us all. I myself don't have a freezer. I don't eat frozen food. I used to, but I stopped doing that quite a few years ago. I've realized that it just doesn't taste the same, even when it's been defrosted, as fresh food. And as he's saying here, that food is losing the important elements, the nutrients that we need in them. And again, with all the supermarkets and such like, they've got food that's been, they say, oh, it was only, a few days old or whatever. But are you taking it home and putting it in your freezer and eating it a month or 2 months later? The masses are. We shouldn't be like that. And as he's saying here, it's, I quite like this word, the essencify. Is that trying to say to us that it's taking away the essence of that being? I'm sure many of you know about the idea of, and I think it's true, when you get just any old meat that's come from a factory where an animal's been penned in for a long time, all its life, so it's got all its misery going into it because it's not a free being. Then it's so frightened when it's going to the slaughterhouse and it's slaughtered, terrifying, awful thing happening to it. So all that energy is going into that meat, and then we're eating it. And as I was saying before, I try and do from farms where the animals are free range and can run around. At least they're happy. And hopefully they're going in a way that's not so terrifying as many of these abattoirs. I've lived near an abattoir in Wales. It was one of the most awful places, hearing them animals screaming. And then I was shown videos of what they did to them, which was not nice, how they dealt with them and moving them up and down around in strange machines, because they were saying that it helped the juices run through the veins and the blood and was going through the whole of the muscle to help it taste better and things. So was the terror of that poor animal because it was still alive. These people doing all this are just inhumane, really, aren't they? But they think they're doing it because it helps us have a better quality of food, but it's not at all. We have to be careful where we get our food from. And having food in cans is something that Gurdjieff is going to talk about next. And also this abnormality proceeded in the ordinary processes of being existence of the free brain beings who have taken your fancy because, Hussein liked us. In this instance, in the case of this new group, and continues to be spread and to be fixed everywhere there, also, of course, in consequence of the fact that subsequent to the time when they, that is to say, when all the free brain beings in general of that planet of yours had ceased actualizing themselves the indispensable being efforts, there was then gradually destroyed in them the possibility for the crystallization in their common presences of their being data, thanks to which, even in the absence of the guidance of true knowledge, the maleficence for themselves of any of their manifestations could be sensed instinctively. We're given food pre-processed, pre-prepared. We're not doing the preparation anymore. Very few people I know cook food from the start, with the very basics and put it all together. I know a few, and they make wonderful stews and curries, and I love going to their houses for dinner. You all know who you are. Tastes so much better. And also the love that they're putting into it when they're making something from scratch also comes out in that food, and you love it. And maybe you were lucky enough to have grown up with families that made food like that, and the home cooking was to die for, that kind of thing. Not many people do food like that anymore. I know myself, when I was younger, I didn't enjoy cooking. So I know when my food ended up pretty rubbish and crap, because I wasn't putting in the right vibrations into it. So now I try and enjoy making my food. And as I was saying, blessing my food so that I'm getting the full nutrients and everything, the quality of that food is helping me, feeding me as well. It can be difficult to cook sometimes, especially makes me cough. You know, when you're living alone or if you've got a big family to feed. You're living alone, it's difficult to buy enough, well, to buy food that's not going to go to waste. When you're living with a big family, you've got to buy enough food to feed everybody. You know, and it's, again, that plays on what can you afford to buy. And all these things obviously stress us out even more. So we have to think about what it is we're doing. Is it quality we're going for or quantity? I'm just putting that out there. But then Gurdjieff goes on to talk about how the authorities were finding ways to help us store food by putting it in tin cans. Again, cans, they say they can last forever, and maybe they can, but they're going to lose that quality over time. Maybe we should be stockpiling in case it is the end of the world and we need, you know, stockpiles of food for if everything goes berserk. You know, then we're going to need to eat the tinned food. But when we're buying that tinned food from the shops, we don't really know how long it's been there or how long it's been in there. And we don't know what that tin or that can is doing to the food. It's like all this problem with food being in plastic is not great for the food. All that plastic is being taken into the food. And I know there's now people trying to stop us having food wrapped in plastic, which is great. When I go shopping now, I don't go to a shop where they still wrap up, let's say, for example, a cucumber or something like that. You know, I want to buy it with no plastic in it, not just to help the planet, but also because I don't want it going into the food. You know, plastic's bad. So we need to be thinking about the quality of the food that we're putting in, that we're ingesting, as well as the air that we're breathing in. And I know we're all living in a polluted world. We can get out into the countryside and do some proper breathing and breathing in properly the real air. It does make a difference. I know when I go to various cities, I can feel the difference in the air quality. But I also try and bless that air when it's coming in. And of course, then the other food is the impressions that we're taking in, what we're seeing. You know, this is what Gurdjieff encourages us to go to new places, see new things, do new things, because these impressions will have an impression on us and help us. Let me just check that was where I was going to leave it. Right, just going to read one more bit. In the present case, if only a few of these unfortunates possess this instinct proper to free-brain beings, they might then, if only thanks merely to habitual accidental being associations and confrontations, first themselves become aware, and afterwards inform all the rest, that as soon as the prime connection with common nature of any product in general serviceable as a first being food is severed, then no matter if this product be kept completely isolated, that is to say, hermetically sealed, frozen, or essencified, it must, like everything else in the universe, change its form and decompose according to the same principle and in the same order in which it was formed. Here you should know concerning the active elements from which all cosmic formations are in general formed by nature, both those subject to transformation through the Tatata cosmoses, which are the products of the first food of beings, as well as in general all other completely spiritualized and half spiritualized arisings, that as soon as the corresponding time arrives, these active elements, in whatever conditions they may be found, obligatorily begin separating in a certain order of succession from these masses in which they were fused during the trogo-auto-egocratic process. And the same, of course, proceeds with those products so dear to the American beings, which they preserve in what are called hermetically sealed cans. So people, eat fresh, stay fresh, and be fresh.